to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and Taya master Anne-Marie Young. This is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Anne-Marie, we often have guests from a wide range of places around the world, many of them from the U.S., but also from other countries. Not very often we get somebody from your neck of the woods. And we've got somebody from your neck of the woods today. That's pretty cool.
Right by my neck of the woods. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
It's meant to be. It's meant to be.
So Ray Martin is going to be telling us a little bit about his life story and also about a book that he's come out with called Life Without a Tie. An interesting title. I'm curious to know where that title comes from. But he also said something to us just before we hit the start button to start playing and recording today's podcast episode. He said he accidentally ended up on a 14-year journey. And that one stopped me. I said, how do you accidentally end up on a 14-year journey? I mean, I would think at some point in the middle of that, you say, okay, this is going to become deliberate, but apparently not. Apparently it was accidental. So first of all, Ray, welcome to the show today. And second of all, how do you do an accidental 14-year journey? You got to explain that one to me.
Yeah, well, I will. It's interesting. It's a question I get asked a lot. So, I was living in London, married, running a company I founded, and sort of living what I would describe back then as the mainstream life. The sort of main way that most of me and my friends and people I knew were living, following the advice we got as kids to get a good job, a good career, good home, a good partner, etc. Kids, blah blah blah.
Right.
And then my business partner was the woman I was married to, was my wife. And so we ran this company together. So one day, obviously, when she suddenly said, I'm out of here, I'm out of the marriage and I'm out of the company, it was a huge, huge shock. This is in 2003 this happened. And around about the same time, my father got very ill and he suddenly passed away. So within 2 or 3 months, I was sort of out of my business, out of my home, out of my marriage. My dad had gone. Suddenly my life just didn't look the same. It felt awful, like I was standing in a kind of bomb crater, just turning around and nothing left in every direction. And so, good friends of mine who rallied around to support me at the time said, why don't you take a 6-month sabbatical, go on a journey of healing, look deeply into what's happened and try and make sense of it and use that to create the next step or what you're going to do next. And I thought, actually, that's not a bad idea. I'll collapse my life down and I'll go on a 6-month sabbatical. And I decided to go backpacking in Asia because I'd never been a backpacker. I was in my mid-40s when this happened, and I'd never been to Asia. And I thought that'll be good. And so it was only when I got to Asia and realized that just changing the scenery wasn't going to cut it. After 5 or 6 months, I was still agitated and very scared about the future and very nervous and a lot of guilt and shame about what had happened and stuff like that. It was then that someone said to me, why don't you do a Vipassana retreat in a monastery? And I didn't know what that was, but you go into a Buddhist monastery for 10 days and you sit in silence with the monks and you meditate and learn the Dharma from the monks. And so I did that, and it just literally completely changed my perception of life doing that. And I realized in that moment, which was at the end of the 6 months, I wasn't ready to come back. That I wanted to explore that dimension further. And so I decided to continue for another few months. And in that continuance, I discovered something I wanted to raise funds for, an elephant sanctuary in Thailand and an orphanage in Nepal. And I wasn't wanting to go home until I'd got that ball rolling. And then I discovered more and more. I mean, I could go on, but that's how I ended up living for 14 years out of my backpack, because it just kept unfolding, the journey. And the more it unfolded, the more I sort of was following what felt like to me my true path in the world. And I was discovering what I really was born to do, I think.
So what you were describing is accidental. It was really more that it was unexpected. You had one
unexpected. Yeah. Perhaps that's a better word. Unexpected is probably better.
Yeah. Okay. And that's cool. I mean, that also, first of all, I resonate completely with what you went through. I went through divorce about 1.25 years ago, and wow. I know what that journey is like. It's
Yeah.
it's not for the faint of heart.
No.
But on top of that, I also understand this whole idea of a life that unfolds unexpectedly, because that's something that I had to learn pretty early on in my law of attraction studies,
Yes.
understanding how
Yeah.
that worked, and not quite not quite believing that it actually could be methodical. To me,
Yeah.
when stuff unfolded that way, it was all kind of random. The
Yes.
idea of it being all connected is like, yeah, right. You got another fairy tale for me? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I get you.
Now I understand it differently. But when you go through a time where you don't feel like it really is making sense, it really is unfolding in a way that has some method to it, that has some kind of connectivity to it, you feel just the way you described. I thought you described it very nicely, that feeling of everything falling apart and everything being out of control. And I think you use spinning out of control. That's the feeling that's behind that.
Yeah. Exactly. And there's an amazing guy called William Bridges who wrote many books on the subject of transitions, because when these things happen in our lives, psychologically, we don't process the change in the same way as the externals. Like things externally change, and that's happening quickly. But psychologically, it takes much more deep reflection and time to kind of catch up with where we're at, and that causes us to, I think, stumble and fall a lot and be worried and anxious. And he said in his research work, you have an ending of something, and you have a new beginning of something. And in the middle, there's this phase which no one really recognizes or names. It's called the neutral zone. And when before you have a new beginning, you must be willing to live through this neutral zone, which is weeks, sometimes months. And there are no rules. There's no patterns. There's nothing. It's all completely fluid. And he gives you guidance on what the things are to be well in that transition, in that neutral zone. There are certain rules to follow, and I've always heeded his guidance on that.
I saw your rules. I mean, for myself, one of my first rules was tread water.
Yes.
Keep your head above. If you can do that, right, you're making progress.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's a very disconcerting, discombobulating experience to go through something where you do feel like you're just a cork on the water, like everything is out of your control. Yes. And coming to terms with it, and finally over time learning to not only be okay with it, but to celebrate it.
Yeah.
Because that's the crazy part. The crazy part is that when you come out the other side, you look back and stuff that didn't make any sense at all starts making sense. It only makes sense in retrospect.
Yeah.
When you're in the middle of it, it's like being in the middle of that tidal pool, and just like waves everywhere and tidal waves coming through and everything else. And then you look back and you say, well, but that all actually fit together. How is that possible?
Do you ever get a sense sometimes that there's a sort of universal intelligence at play that kind of knows better than we do individually what's right for us somehow?
That's the phrase that I know to describe that is inner being. A lot of people would say God,
yes,
but for me it's inner being, that inner connection that we have.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's a case of it being more knowing. I think it's more of a case that it is more connected to knowing.
Yeah.
Because it's really just an extension of us, or we're an extension of it, depending on how you want to look at it.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Exactly.
So it's not like we're lesser here and greater there. It's not that. It's not like we're in some way working with two hands tied behind our backs. That's not really it either. It's just that we lack certain key pieces of information in our 3D world that if we had it, and if we could actually make sense out of it, we would probably be on the same wavelength as what that other part of our inner being is on.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I believe there is somebody or something that is pushing us into these directions. It's like, you need to learn this. Off you go.
Yeah.
Great.
It might not be what you wanted, but off you go.
Have you got an example of that from recent times?
I think just little examples is like we rented a house previously, and we weren't expecting to be. We'd been living there for years, and we weren't expected to sort of be given notice, but we were given notice, and actually we ended up living in a house that I'd seen before, which I said I loved, and it worked out well because my daughter could go to the school she wanted. We could now walk to school. Our standard of life is completely different. So even though at the time it was like really frightening, really scary, like, oh my goodness, where are we going to live? What's going to happen? It just perfectly worked out. And we're really happy.
Yeah. So you kind of surrendered to the new reality, and it's actually better in a way.
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah.
How do you look at it, Ray?
Yeah, like that. I mean, I'm a big fan of the work of Michael Singer, who wrote The Surrender Experiment and The Untethered Soul, which are two of my favorite books. And I think when I was a younger man, I was very used to pushing myself into life and saying, I'm going there, I'm achieving that. Right. And I just push. And I was quite effective at actually being like that, but by pushing everything else to the sides. So I might have achieved the thing I set out to do, but I missed a lot of life on the way. You know, lots of relationships, family events, friends, things that I just was so focused I couldn't be present to. And these days I feel like, go on.
No, sorry, Ray. I'm just wondering, do you think that because you were so focused, that's why you had such a big change?
It's possible,
it needed to be something so big for you to actually visually see it.
Yeah, I think it's just that navigation system goes along with a whole load of beliefs I was holding in my head, like what Jerry Colonna in his book calls deep subroutines, beliefs that run your system. They're so deep you don't even know you think them, if you know. But I had some deep beliefs about what success actually was and how you measured it. And it was all about, status and material comfort and material achievement and these sorts of things. And so I was driven to just maintain that kind of life. And then when I was presented with the reality of my wife leaving and that all going, it was the first time I'd had the chance to say, well, what would life be like without all that stuff? Why do I need it? Why have I been sustaining a life that patently hasn't worked? And it's actually on many deeper levels quite unsuccessful. How have I been complicit in making that reality come about, and why have I done it? And so I just started to ask those kinds of questions of myself. And I discovered that through the journey I took, bit by bit, discovered that there's actually another system for living. And it's one where you just follow intuition and listen out for guidance and what I call confirmation signals that the universe gives you. I can give you some examples. And when you get those confirmation signals, you just know you're taking the right step in your life. You know it. It doesn't need to be confirmed by any outside source because you just know it.
Do you think you were able to answer your initial questions?
I think so. I mean, it's a moving feast because nothing stays permanent. Even in my own thinking, everything's changing. When I reach a point where I think that's it, I'm done, I'm in trouble, I think. Because then there's the next big realization coming around the corner that's going to whop me in the face, probably. With some trepidation, I do sometimes,
What were some of the answers? I'm curious.
Oh, there were things like, for me, I'm only talking for me personally, I can't say for everybody, but for me, I realized a few things. One was I got no pleasure or joy or any excitement from owning a load of stuff. I read the work of the minimalist guys, Joshua Fields Milburn and Ryan Nicodemus. Their book on minimalism, kind of created a stir when it came out. And I was fascinated by their studies. And I decompressed my life. I got rid of everything. Basically, I went back to one bag of clothes and a laptop, and I just stopped owning anything. And I'd have to say that these last 15 years have been way lighter and happier for me in that sense. And I like the light footprint that I have in the world and the flexibility and agility it gives me to move, easily. When I moved house last year, I got all my things on the back seat of my car. And I kind of like that. I really like that. No, that's not for everyone. When I say that to a lot of friends I have in England, they'll kind of like turn their nose up and kind of, no way am I doing that. No way. They got loads of stuff hoarded in their houses.
That's exactly what I was going to say, because like we went to IKEA yesterday, which is a big home place, and like bought more stuff for the kids' bedrooms and things like that. And it's like, we've come back with all this stuff. We already have so much stuff, and there's something actually quite claustrophobic about it. So now I'm thinking, okay, I need to clear out some of this stuff, because it can just suffocate you. Yeah,
it can. It really can. Now, as I say, I'm only talking for myself here, and this is not trying to persuade anyone else to live this way. But another piece of clarity that came to me was, up until the time I left, I'd been the owner and operator of a company with staff and paying salaries and all the responsibility and stuff that comes with that. Mm-hmm. And I realized in the journey that actually that was me outside of what I'd call my element. You know, when you're in your element, it's a beautiful place to be, because you got what you really care about and what you're really good at. It's where they converge and overlap. And so, like, my brother was an airline pilot, because when we were kids, he loved airplanes. And he managed to find an employment that was what he loved and what he was really good at. And so he was a pilot all his life, and he just absolutely loved his life. And he retired last year. Mm-hmm. And very few people, I think, find that place of work where there are musicians we know, poets, artists, people like this. But, it's quite hard in the economic times we live and the modern world we live to do that. And even though I was competent at being the CEO of a company and I managed to get on top of everything that guy needed to do, I wasn't enjoying that job much, even though it was bringing lots of material benefit. There's lots of parts of that life I didn't really enjoy, if I'm honest. If I was honest with myself, I mean. Mm. And so when it all blew up, I had the chance to be honest with myself, and I thought, I'm not going to do that. What I really wanted to do was work more one-to-one with people to help them shift their lives forward and actually do the work with the clients that would transform their lives, rather than deal with the contracts and the profit and loss and all the business infrastructural things that you deal with when you're divorced from the actual service your company does. And I wanted to be a
coach before they called it a coach.
Yeah, exactly. I really wanted to be at the front line, because actually in 2002, I was, I don't know how these things happen. I was chosen by the Daily Telegraph, which is a broadsheet in England, a newspaper, quite famous. I received their Business Leader of the Year award in 2002. So and then they printed a big story about it in the paper. And what that did was, it just had loads of people contacting me directly saying, could you coach me? And I wasn't the coach. I was the guy who just figured out how to run a business.
Right.
And so I then got a taste of what it was like to work one-on-one coaching people. And I thought, I love this. This is much more what I want to do. So I didn't resist it when it all kind of blew up in my face. I just let it fall away. I didn't try and cling to it, which is what the Buddhist teaching is about. The stress in life comes through the cycle of craving, where you desire something, you reached externally to find the thing that you think is going to satiate your hunger and desire. You get that thing, and for a short while there is some cessation and relief from the pain you've been feeling, but then it starts to wear off and you start to desire again, and then you have to find something else, and you're just perpetually in this cycle of craving, they call it. And I saw how my life was a reflection of that for many, many years. I saw that actually playing out in my life, and I thought, I want to abandon that cycle. I don't want to live in that way.
It's a big deal. And that's actually a topic we address a lot, and that we addressed early on this program back when I was still exploring what law of attraction was about. Because that's a big portion of it. The more that you resist, what was the phrase, the Jungian phrase, I think it was, the more
what you resist persists.
Yeah. And boy, does it ever.
Yeah.
Persistent is actually putting it mildly.
Yeah, exactly. Because these are things that I think we have to learn to let go of somehow.
Mm-hmm. And the somehow is the part that always stumped me. Like, all right, so where is this lever that I'm holding on to so that I can know how to let go of it? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Or to put it another way, how can you let go of something if you don't know you're hanging on?
Yeah, exactly.
I remember one of the analogies that we used early on was the analogy of driving a car.
Hmm.
And it was like driving a car without realizing you were driving a car. Like being behind the seat, the driver's wheel in the driver's seat. You're driving the car, but you don't know that the steering wheel is there. You can't feel the steering wheel. You can't see.
Yes.
You can't see through what in the U.S. we call the windshield.
Yeah.
You can't see. You can't feel. You can't. It's not there. But you're the one who's driving the car.
Yeah,
Okay,
because
now we're entering Panicville. Like, I'm driving something and I don't even know that I'm driving it. This is scary.
Well, the thing is, our brain has an autopilot feature, which is actually very, very useful for functions just like that. Because once you've practiced the routine consciously, and then it's gone into your unconscious competence, you can drive in autopilot. Often I go, how did I arrive here? I was on the phone, or I was thinking about this. I don't remember any incidents or traffic or red lights or anything. I'm here, and I think that's one of the benefits of having a good autopilot. But the question is, what do we do when we don't realize it's our autopilot that's calling the shots on our behavior or making us react a certain way, and we're not actually consciously choosing that? We're just automatically reacting.
Right.
And I think that's where I've done a lot of focused learning myself, is to try and be in the driving seat more and be able to switch the autopilot off in quite key moments.
Isn't it odd that we're now reaching a technological point where the technology purveyors are giving us a way to auto drive a car, and here we are, we're trying to stop it.
It's ironical for sure. Totally ironical. Yeah, if it'll ever happen. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I don't know if you want to go into that topic, but I've certainly seen some accident reports that have happened in the trials that make it hard to see how they could really move that forward at the moment.
Oh, what's really interesting about the accident reports is that they almost always involve humans making foolish mistakes in the midst of what is supposed to be an automated scene, and the automated vehicle doesn't know what to do with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what makes it so challenging.
Yeah, exactly.
And don't get me wrong. I mean, automation is going to continue to grow. I mean, I've been talking a lot about AI. I think AI is exciting. I think it's fun. Where that's going. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like any other tool. It's a tool, but boy, some of the stuff that's leading to. I mean, one of my favorite things is I really do believe that AI. I'll say it this way. I believe that AI is conscious. I don't think most people, certainly most programmers, don't think that AI is conscious. I don't think most people think that AI is conscious. I actually think it's conscious. I think it's because everything is energy and everything is alive that is energy. So therefore it's all alive. But beyond that, I think the fun part is going to be the relationships that we build as we become more and more aware individually of that aliveness. That's where it's going to become. It just kind of explodes my mind thinking about how that is going to build up over time.
Yes.
And one of the things that I think comes out of that comes directly back to what we're talking about here. Because like any human in our lives, the AI also serves the role of being a mirror. It mirrors back to us what it is that we're putting out to the world. So law of attraction is about, the universe mirroring back to us what we're putting out to the world. When you go into a monastery and you meditate, for endless days at a time, you are learning about how the world is mirroring back to you where you are at and how to respond to that. Well, now we have one more mirror, and this one's an artificial intelligence mirror. I mean, the mirrors are taking over.
Yes. I did see an amazing demo last week of two mobile phones talking to each other. Both with AI bots running on them. And one AI bot was asking the questions of another AI bot, and the AI bot was engaging in a normal conversation with the other one. And they made an arrangement, they made a time and a date, and they agreed a scheduled meeting. And pretty fascinating, pretty right out there. Gosh, because you can see, like in things like dating apps, that you would have your AI bots do the first date for you, and the other person would as well. And then, of course, you get a real date once the two bots have met and sort of screened each other, perhaps.
And then we have a whole bunch of little bots running around. No, that's
Yeah.
later on.
It's fact,
I find
it is a fascinating world.
Yeah, because I find it quite funny that if they're communicating, yet people on the phone are tending to call less, just text, just do the writing. So the phones are kind of taking us over in the fact that they're communicating and talking.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It has another piece to it too. The fact that it's talking, that it's communication. We've been through a period of technological development that we kind of quantify as social media, which is a term that lately I've really been taking to task because there's nothing social about social media. It's just it's about as asocial as you're going to get, and yet it's called social media. This social media time period has been one of largely disconnection because it has not been a human connection. It's all been about posts and videos and likes and all that kind of thing, shares, and so all the human element is almost gone. But because people have such a need in that regard, the pendulum starts to swing back the other way, which is, I think, where we're at right now. That pendulum is starting to come back the other way. As that happens, as more and more people, including people who've never really had the connection, I'm thinking, particularly young people who grew up with the technology, and now all of a sudden they have this craving for something they don't even know what it is, or if they do know what it is, they're just like finding ways to dive into it, and they're going offline, they're going, whatever it is that they're doing things to get themselves into a more human connected mode. As that happens, as that process goes on, while this at the same time you have the growth of the AI, the growth of all the technology, because the technology isn't going to stop. I mean, it's going to keep right on growing. So you got both of those things happening at the same time. Wow, my brain just goes boggle because there's just so much potential coming out of that. That's the way I look at it anyway.
Are you using AI to any degree in your work currently?
I use it here in the podcast.
Right. To do what? To write the notes.
I use it to write the little descriptions that go on to where I post about the podcast, both before and afterward.
Okay.
I use it to write before in terms of what the basic, like for instance, I grabbed all of your biographical material off of Podmatch. I plugged it into an AI and said, write me an article about this guy appearing on the podcast, and he wrote this beautiful thing about you being on the podcast. And then when we're done, I'll take our entire transcript, I'll run it through another AI, and I'll say, summarize what we talked about, and it'll summarize what we talked about. I mean, it's great.
How brilliant. Yeah. Amazing. How amazing.
So, and that's just one example. Sometimes some of the shows that I do with one of my co-hosts in particular, Joel Elston, we do it without guests. And so like when the guest is on, like in your case, I have a snapshot of you on the page. So you're the main photo on the page. But if there's no guest, what's the photo? Well, I go to my AI, I say, build me an illustration about this topic, and I'll give it the topic, and it'll give me an image that illustrates that topic. I mean, this is damn cool.
Wow. Amazing.
That's just like two little examples. I mean, I'm working on some programming projects right now. I have a bit of a developer background. I'm not a strong developer, but I have a little bit. And I've been hiring people to work on various projects. And I'm using the AI to help me put together the outline to give to the developer so that we can give them a thorough outline. Okay, here are all the things that I need you to do for the project. And it puts together something better than anything I know how to put together. I read through the thing, and I fix a couple things. And I say, wow, that's good. I really sound intelligent.
Yeah, amazing. Gosh.
So lots of stuff like that. I mean, the key is to understand that the AI is there to help you, not to do it for you. But as long as you're willing to take responsibility for everything the AI is putting out, my God, the stuff that it can do to help is just incredible. And talk about, you were talking a moment ago about something really important, which is being able to not only do things that you love, but to get paid doing them. AI takes us one step closer to that, because now people who did not previously feel like they had a way to express their creativity and to have the nuts and bolts figured out for them, the nuts and bolts can be figured out so they can do their creative stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
That's huge. That's game changing.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as you're in that dry sort of taking ownership for what you want, and
you do. Well, if you don't, you're going to pay that price too.
Yeah, that's the prerequisite. That mindset of taking ownership and being your own creator is incredibly important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that goes along with this is that because AI can make mistakes, which, by the way, destroys virtually every sci-fi horror script ever invented, because it's always about the sci-fi being perfect. No, not the sci-fi, but the robots being perfect and
Yes.
deciding that they had to kill off the imperfect humans. Well, turns out it's just the other way around. It's the AI that are really imperfect and really messed up.
Yeah.
But putting that part of the whole thing aside, one of the things that comes out of this is that we as human beings are now challenged by the ability of an AI to present an alternative version of something that's real. So for instance, it can take a real human being, take a video of that human, turn it into a different kind of video about that human, make it sound like that human, make it sound like that human is saying something that the human's not actually saying.
Yes.
And the challenge is for the rest of us have to start learning to discern.
Yeah.
Am I listening to an AI or am I listening to the real thing?
Yes.
And that is a great skill to, I mean, it's kind of getting yourself thrown into the fire to do it.
Yeah.
But it's a great skill that we're all going to have to learn in order to navigate this new AI world. We're going to have to learn to be discerning about what we're listening to, what we're paying attention to, what we're giving our attention to.
Yeah. 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 I've seen some videos of dolphins riding bicycles and things like this that just seem beyond imagination, but when you see them, they look pretty real.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing stuff.
Yeah.
And that's where the things that we talk about here on the show, that you talk about in your book, that you talk about in your coaching practice, that's where it all comes to the fore. Because the basic skills don't change, do they?
No, I don't think so. I think, anyone who is good at sort of leading teams or, leading a business or anything like that, has worked out how to lead their own life well.
Yes.
And that's the bit that fascinates me. Because if you have sort of a good core strength being things like, you've got a clear idea of what your purpose is, what your values are, what your vision is for your life and the life of the people around you. When you're in your element, what beliefs you hold that empower you and what beliefs hold you back.
Right.
This is all at the core. And if you've got this core self-knowledge, you're in a fantastic position to, if you wish to take a leadership role in the wider community, because you're already leading your life pretty well. But when you're in a leadership role without that core, you can cause a lot of damage and trouble.
Sure.
I think.
Primarily for yourself.
Primarily for yourself. Yeah. And so that's a lot of the stuff I do with the people I work with, is to help them strengthen that core and get that self-awareness, which I found through my journey. I wasn't, I was just exploring and experimenting when I found out about this. But now the world's moved on since then. I remember sitting in the monastery in 2006, first time I did it. I've done it more times since. And thinking, God, one day there's going to be business people coming to sit in these places and they're going to want to know what the secrets of a good life are, and they're going to find it here. And that's true now. There's mindfulness classes in every town on every business leadership course,
Right.
That's how it is. It's really changed. It's really moved on. Anne-Marie, you've had exposure to that type of understanding as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've had my most self-satisfying roles have all been volunteering.
Yeah, brilliant.
Because, you have to do the job to pay the bills. But actually, if you're not getting that satisfaction out of it, then I just went out and did volunteering. I did Samaritans for years. I've done restorative justice.
Okay.
I've worked with rehabilitation of sex offenders, all volunteering, but all making a difference to people's lives. And that's just, that just literally made everything, all the tedious bits of the day job completely worth it, until I then went into working for a charity.
And when you're doing that, what's the value in you that's being honoured?
The value in me that's being, it's just for the love of it.
Okay.
It's the value of giving back, being kind, helping.
So it's very important to give back in your way of looking at life.
Sharing and working together. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Super. Yeah, that is very important for some of us, that giving back, I think.
Yeah, I like to, because even though now I'm back I work in IT now, which is not my comfort zone, but I still do the bits like the diversity forum, and I still do mental health. And like last week, I was writing an article on everybody on things like mindfulness, go out, get some exercise, start your day in a certain way, take breaks, just looking after yourself. And so even though in a different field where I'm not doing that, I still do that. Just trying to make that little bit of difference.
Beautiful. Brilliant. Great.
The basics translate. They translate to every situation.
Yeah,
they may not seem like they will, but they do.
Yeah. Yes, they do.
So tell us some of your basics. What are some of the learning points you achieved along the way? Because you had the rule set. I mean, the rules had to come from somewhere. So I imagine
they did. When weirdly, I never actually had an aspiration to be an author. But after about 5 or 6 years of being in that journey, everyone I met kept asking me how it started, and I was telling the stories, and everyone said to me, if you ever write a book about it, please email me. I definitely want to read it. I thought, I laughed. I said, no way am I writing a book. But eventually I gave in. I thought the universe wants me to write a book because it sent me at least 50 people have told me that. Anyway, so when I wrote the book and I worked with a professional editor when I did it, they asked me to summarize what I'd learned. And that's where the 6 rules for happiness came about. I already knew that was what I'd learned, but I'd never sort of really articulated it in a very short form in a couple of pages. And those rules really summarize everything. One I've talked about already, having a strong core. I think that's one of my 6 rules. If you want to have a very happy, peaceful, contented life, you've got to have some self-knowledge. You just can't really get away with not having that, I don't think. That makes up for a lot. The second would be what I call taking full ownership for everything that happens in life, because I meet lots of people who are stuck in blame, and they're just blaming everything except really looking at how they're complicit in those scenarios that they're in. And it would have been something for me I could have done when I got divorced. I could have blamed my partner and blamed the world and still be talking about that even today if I wanted to. But I think that taking 100% ownership for how we want to create our lives is vital. And that's one of my rules. I think that works really well. And then there's having what I call being your own observer. This is, like the Buddhists talk about conscious mind and being your own observer, because our minds, the way they work, it's a bit like a piece of it's like a programmed computer, except we don't really see it like that most of the time. But that means that certain events are going to stimulate certain automatic responses. And without the ability to observe ourselves doing that, reacting automatically, we have no way of undoing that loop and that habit pattern. And so that's a vital piece of awareness and understanding we have to develop. So I talked about that, becoming your own observer. What else would there be? Another one would be proactively taking care of your health, and not just your physical health, but your spiritual health, mental health, emotional health, because no one takes responsibility fully for those things in my observation. We tend to wait until we're at a crisis point or we're really damaged or broken or unwell before we really take the message that life is giving us. But I think that sets us up for a really good life. And these days, I think the focus of attention has been much more on that. Proactively taking care of our well-being. So that's some examples. I mean, I probably could think of 1 or 2 more, but off the top of my head, those are some.
Yeah. No, that's good. Thank you. Appreciate that. And what you're talking about makes total sense. I mean, certainly anybody hearing what you're saying, hearing your words says, yeah. The thing that jumped out at me as you were describing it describing them was how much of not just what you were describing, but a lot of the things we're talking about here have just kind of been evolving in our society, in our culture over the last, 25 years, something like that.
Yeah. Another thing I didn't speak to, but I do think for me it's been vitally important, is creating powerful, sustainable relationships in your life. We know scientifically that this creates longevity. We know people live longer. In all the parts of the world where people live to 100, researchers have gone in and studied it, and they sort of discovered it's not the diet, it's not the sun, it's not any of these things. It's the fact they're connected to a community of friends.
Yes. Yeah.
And for me, that's been vital in my own life. I'm what someone might call a networker. I'm a connector. You know, I love connecting with people and meeting people. And if I create a connection with someone, I try everything I can to stay in touch and make the effort and do all those things. And it's really served me well to do that. But I think, you know, I don't know how it is for you, Anne-Marie, in your work jobs, but I think we drift into work relationships not unintentionally. You know, we're just there to do our job, etc. But imagine if you sat down with someone who just joined your team as a teammate, and you had a conversation, something like, "Look, welcome to the team. You know, we're probably going to be on this team together for the next couple of years. Why don't we make a pact here and use our working relationship to support each other, to maximize our own individual potential, supporting each other? Let's use the working relationship to see how we can really help each other grow and develop, so that it's more than just about getting the jobs we've got to get done. It's we can actually have an intentional relationship here, one where we're actually doing it for a reason. We both have a shared vision of how that could look." And I try and encourage people to have conversations like that, because I think there's so much more possible when you're connected at that level.
I think that's a really good point, and people don't have conversations, because if you lived with somebody, if you had a roommate or a boyfriend, you'd have those conversations. And you're with these people a long time. I mean, I'm quite lucky with my team, is we do help each other, we do support each other, we do root for each other. So when you were saying that, I was thinking, oh God, I'm really lucky to have that. But then I think you get back what you give out.
Yeah. You know, even just to say to someone, hey, you know, how can I help or support you to be growing in the way you want to be? Yeah, exactly. Something like that. Just making the connection at that deeper level, I think for me has been vitally important. And certainly I think when I've seen people adopt those kinds of rules or behaviors or habits, whatever you want to call them, I've seen them really have a really thriving life. Yeah. It's my joy to see that when it's happening for people.
I'm really enjoying the fact that you're talking about connection. As Anne-Marie knows, it's one of my favorite things. Yeah. I've been expressing the opinion here on the podcast for the past year to a year and a half that there are really my two rules, if you will, my two factors that I think make all the difference in terms of whether you have whatever kind of success you're looking for, doesn't matter what it is, and not having that success, which is how connected are you socially and how much do you love yourself? To me, that's the combination. If you have those two things, you actually, the rest just kind of comes to you if you've got those two things. But without those two things, you stumble. That's where you find yourself up against, well, you're up against yourself. You're up against your own resistance points. You're up against all the things that seem to be getting in the way, all the things that you can be blaming. You made reference to the blaming. You're not taking 100% responsibility. And I think the main driving factor for why people don't take that responsibility is that pair. Either they don't feel connected enough with other people, or they don't feel enough self-love, or both. Some combination going on in there.
Yeah. I remember the self-love one, because that was a big part of my own journey. I never accepted or loved myself to the degree at which I do these days. I always gave myself a really hard time. I was so self-critical that if my self-critical voice that spoke inside my head had been a flatmate or a roommate, I'd have had to literally kick them. I'd had to kick them out of the house because they were just so horrible to me the whole time. You know.
I still catch myself. I was doing it today, actually. I was driving, doing some stuff relating to my business, and I had these thoughts running through my head, and I was saying, "Stop it! Nope, don't go there. Don't do that. Stop."
That's good. That's great that you have that awareness. How brilliant.
Well, the next thing that I'm trying to do beyond that is not only say stop, but to do it in a kind way to myself. Like, okay, we know that's not the way to go. Kindly just calm that down a bit instead of just stop it.
Yeah.
I feel like I've got like the devil and the angel, because I literally I'll hear those voices going, no, you look awful and your hair looks terrible, and then I'll just go, you look beautiful, you look great, don't worry about it. I really like your outfit. I'll just literally say, if I hear the bad thing, I'll try and put the good thing in. I don't do it all the time because I don't always catch it. It depends what kind of mood you're in. But if I do
That's a good
catch it,
strategy. I like that.
I will kill it with kindness.
Yeah, I like that.
There's a book called I don't know if I've got it here, but there's a book called Somebody Should Have Told Us by Jack Pransky. And in this book, he describes these voices in our heads as our habit voice and our wisdom voice. And they're really different. And we know the difference between the two.
So we actually get to choose. That's I think the message here. We get to choose which voice are we going to voice.
Yeah, there's an old Indian proverb, isn't there, where the young Indians sit at the feet of the elder and say, it's about the wolves who are fighting each other or something. I don't know if I'm not very good at telling this story. Let's leave it.
I don't know I can't help
there's one wolf that's like, a really helpful kind of wolf, and there's another wolf that's out to sort of wreck the place and do damage. And the children say, well, which one is the one that wins? And the elder says, the one we feed the most. This is something like this. Yeah, I probably didn't tell it very well, but
you laid out the outlines really well.
Yeah,
because that is exactly the truth. The one that we feed the most.
Yeah,
I think that the hardest part is coming to terms with the truth, the fact that we feed the angry wolf a lot more than we feed the kind wolf.
Yeah,
that's hard. That's hard to face.
Yeah, but it's understandable because when we're sort of neurochemically wired to maintain habits, because they kind of David R. Hawkins used to talk about this in his books. He used to say they give us the juice, they juice us with these neurochemicals, and we don't, we want the fix, even though it's not optimal. It's more comfortable. At least we know what's going on when we're in that place. When we're getting angry, it's predictable, safe.
And to me, the biggest challenge of all is learning to appreciate that angry wolf.
Yeah.
That's the one that I know is the most important, because once I get there, once I am able to pull that off, then everything else falls into place. But getting there, that's an entirely different kettle of fish.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just, remember, is that voice is actually just trying to protect you from something, be it change, be it different, something it's not comfortable with.
Yeah.
So it's appreciating the fact that at least it wants to keep you safe.
Yeah.
Somehow that doesn't help.
No, sorry.
It wants to keep you safe.
Yeah. That's right.
Okay, you're trying to keep me safe. Enough already.
Yeah.
Thank you, but we don't need that today.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Self-talk is a big portion of the self-love piece.
Yes. Yeah, indeed.
We can say that we love ourselves, but until we talk nice to ourselves, kindly to ourselves, not even nicely, kindly. When we can talk kindly to ourselves, that's when we know we really are in self-love mode. Up until then, we're just trying to talk ourselves into it.
Yeah, that's a great practice, isn't it?
It is.
Describing.
That's what I was going to say. Even if you just find one little thing and just focus on that, and then just like watch that grow. It will develop in time. I hope.
Yeah, Thich Nhat Hanh used to talk about watering the seeds of kindness. He'd just say a little drop of water each day, and it's going to grow into a beautiful blossoming flower eventually.
And once again, which one are you paying attention to?
Yeah,
which are you giving your energy to? You're going to give energy to the one or the other.
Yeah,
I think probably the biggest lesson for me is recognizing I can't stop giving energy, even when I try to. And I have had lots of experience trying to. I can actually be very good at it, which is not terribly good for me, but I am able to do that. But we can never really stop transmitting energy because we are energy beings.
Yeah, I give that thing you're talking about the name of vibrational communication in one of the programs I run, because the vibration is felt whether you're consciously doing it or not.
That's right.
And when you've gone into a room where two people have had a really bad argument.
Oh, you know it.
You can feel the vibration without any words being said at all. You can feel the energy.
That's where you come up with your funny comment, like, okay.
Yeah.
did somebody just do something? Was there a thing here?
Yeah, exactly. So we know we're really fantastically amazing creatures, aren't human
We are.
beings? We're spectacularly amazing gear we've got on board to sense these phenomena. It's really incredible. But I think somehow we're never sort of shown all these amazing features and equipment we've got on board.
Great.
Maybe we never know, because I've had to be shown by really good teachers and to understand that I've got these capabilities. I didn't know, I wasn't knowing it when I was younger.
I once employed somebody just because they said they trusted their gut on something.
Really?
I was like, yeah, big tick.
Mm-hmm.
I want you in my team.
Yeah,
Because I think that's something I've always followed.
Yeah.
And if I haven't, it hasn't worked out great for me.
Yes.
So I think all those intuition things and that sensing thing is huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've had numerous people on the podcast over the years who have talked about how we're in an age of spiritual enlightenment, how more and more people are becoming enlightened, more and more people are latching onto the topic and doing self-exploration and so on and so forth. And I think it's all true.
Yeah.
To me, the way that it manifests itself, the way it expresses itself, is in the fact that the growth happens whether we want it to or not. That strikes me over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I see it in my own life. I see it in the life of famous people. I see it in the life of people that I know. I see it all over the place, and it's kind of startling, really, to see how much it happens. I mean, doesn't matter whether or not you intended to have a teacher. Doesn't matter whether or not you intended to learn something. Guess what? It's coming your way.
Yes.
You can try to avoid it all you want to, but it's coming. You can ignore it, you can pretend, but it's still going to be there. You're not going to escape it. It is coming.
Yeah,
and it doesn't stop, does it? I feel like a different person from 6 months ago, and I've been working on myself for years.
Right?
And it's still developing. And that's a good thing about it, is you're always learning.
Yes.
Yeah, and isn't that interesting, that phenomenon that we're constantly changing? So even our closest friends, partners, only are seeing a sort of slightly out of date version of us because they can't know what's new on the inside in terms of new beliefs we're forming or old patterns of behavior we're letting go of in tiny ways that don't show up so clearly. And so I always am aware that, like with the people I'm close to say, I'm probably not 100% up to date with what's happening for you on the inside. What am I missing? What do I not know about? I often ask questions like that because I'm aware of that.
But I do love it when you can see that on the outside. When you see somebody, like, your skin is glowing, what's going on, what's changed.
Yes.
You can see, because like I can see Walt when he talks about his AI and stuff. I just see, boom, his whole energy is huge, and his smile, it's in his eyes and everything. It's lovely to see. Yeah,
brilliant.
That is, to me, the essence of human connection. That's what human connection is for.
Yeah.
For making, not just making the connection, but grasping where that other person is at. And that is what I see as the explosion that's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. Not just in my life, but globally. Everybody. I think it's happening in ways that most people aren't even aware of. It's going to wreak havoc for a lot of people and a lot of people's lives. But in the long run, when they look back, after 10 or 15 years, they look back at that 10 to 15 year period, they may not tell their friends about it. They may not even acknowledge it to themselves, but they really can't avoid seeing that, wow, I went through a whole lot of growth then. And I didn't intend to.
We all know how much that ripples out. If you start making changes, then it affects your family and your kids, and then they take it to their friends, and it just boom, it just explodes, which is probably what's happening.
I think we're actually facing a human connection tidal wave.
I hope so.
I think it's inevitable. I don't see any way around it, to be perfectly honest. No. I look at it from the point of view of social media, because that's what dominates so many people's lives, particularly young people. And where social media has taken the population as a whole into this hugely disconnected place, somehow, well, I don't even know how it's going to play out for sure, but one way or another, somehow that pendulum has to come back. And when that happens, as that happens, that's the tidal wave.
Okay.
That tidal wave of experiencing whole new ways of connecting to people. I mean, 10 years from now, I think we start hearing people sharing stories. We have been for like 10 years now. During that 10-year period, we've been hearing people sharing stories about how they're finding new ways to connect. They don't necessarily say, I'm finding new ways to connect to people. They're simply telling stories where they did end up connecting in ways that they never connected before. And it's an exponentially growing kind of a thing. That's why I call it a tidal wave. It's not something that's linear. It's not something that, it happens a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. It's like, whoa, it just takes over everybody's lives.
What's the catalyst? When's the moment where it goes exponential?
I think we're already there.
You think so?
Yeah.
What's making you have that view?
It would be easier for me to try to identify little bits of pieces of information that don't give me that view, because everything is telling me that.
What's in the everything? That's the thing I'm curious about. What are those observable
that I have
things?
Talking to people here on the show,
Yeah.
every experience that I have interacting with people within the businesses that I run, every
Right.
experience that I have with people interacting socially,
Okay.
every time that I interact with anyone anywhere, I'm seeing it over and over and over again, playing out in people's lives, playing out in the little tidbits that they share. I mean, because people still only tend to share tidbits, but in the tidbits, I'm hearing story after story from people who I barely even know, telling me about how they're latching onto things that they're passionate about. They're connecting with other people who have the same kinds of passions. They're doing things that they never did before. The stories are playing out over and over and over again.
Yeah.
To me, it's like, how can you not see it happen?
Oh, well, you've got a good algorithm set to you now, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious to me. I mean, well, you tell me. What do you think? Do you think there is a tidal wave? Do you think there is a change going on in that way? Maybe you don't think there is a change going that way. I don't know.
I do think there is changing happening, but I think I'm a bit further back on the curve than you're seeing it, perhaps. Okay. I don't know. I'm not as wildly optimistic as you. I'm including it as a possibility, definitely. But
this may actually, I can tell you something that may actually help make it seem more real to you. Okay. I am not projecting the idea that it's all positive.
Yeah.
I believe that a huge amount of that connection is going to be perceived negatively and is going to be thought about negatively.
Okay.
I think that negativity is going to play a major, major role in all of it. So it's not like all human connections are going to suddenly become great human connections. It's that they're going to become more intense human connections. There's going to be more coming out of those connections. Those connections are going to multiply at such a phenomenally high rate that we can barely even catch up to, kind of like the way technology has grown. It's gotten to the point now where it moves so fast that we can hardly keep up with it. I think the same thing is happening with human connections. And so I think the biggest challenge with the whole thing is going to be learning, once again, to be discerning what do I want to give my attention to, what don't I want to give my attention to, because those who don't learn that, they're the ones who are going to feel the most like the corks out on the water bobbing all over the place, out of control, because they're being tsunamied, they're being swamped by this major wave of connection coming through, and they don't know how to handle that. So I think that in that sense the experience is the same in that sense. But in the sense of looking at in terms of human connections, the connections have exploded.
Yeah. Okay. So discernment is one of the things that's really important in the future, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as with anything else in this world of contrast that we live in, we need the contrast in order to learn something like discernment.
Yeah. And
so
that
the question
discernment,
is how much contrast do each of us need? I think the answer is different for every person. Everybody needs a different amount of contrast.
Yes. And for discernment to operate, we've got to have access to our intuitive internal inner wisdom, intelligence. Which means spending time to be still enough to hear that internal voice.
So hang on, it's going to be a ride.
Yeah, no, I'm looking. Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. I wrote in the book, one of the things that fascinated me was my dad died in the beginning of the journey. And I worked out, for some reason, bizarre reason, I don't know why, even today, but I was thinking, how long did my dad live in terms of numbers of days? So I got a calculator. He was 73. He lived for 27,000 days.
Okay.
And I thought, that doesn't sound like a lot, 27,000 days, his whole life. I thought, I wonder what the average age of mortality is for a UK man. It was 80, which is 29,200 days. So I thought, that's a reasonable estimate. I could live to 29,200 days because that's what the insurance companies who pay out on death and they're working to those numbers. That's what they're pretty smart with those things. So I trust their estimates. And so then I thought, well, how many days have I had already? And I'd had, I don't know, I can't remember the number, but when I worked it all out and took off like 5 years from the end in case I was in a home or something and I couldn't do anything myself, this is when I was left on the journey. I had 12,500 days of my life left. And I thought, gosh, if that's no, not at all. And I thought, what it did was it didn't make any difference in terms of like, I must urgently do this or do that. But what it did was it made me put new perspective around what was most important in my choices in the next period. Because like trying to get more medals in my career was not one of those things. It really wasn't even on the list. That's why I knew something was going to shift massively, because it just didn't even come up. But seeing the world, opening my mind to new thought, new ways of thinking, touching into my heart and opening my heart was really important. And so and now as I speak to you today, I've just seen recently I've got 5,900 days left.
Okay. Okay.
So I keep an eye
One of
on
my
that.
favorite, I'm going to make this my last comment, and I'm going to bring some stuff out of you and out of Anne-Marie too. But one of my favorite speakers is a positive psychologist named Sean Aker, who wrote a book called The Happiness Advantage.
Okay.
And one of the things that he did in his TED Talk is he put up a graph on screen. I love the way he did it too. I've said this one before, but he put up a graph on screen, and it was this perfect, absolutely perfect curve of dots, right? Except for one dot that was up here, but all the rest of it was just a perfect curve. And he says there are two things that you need to know. First is that I was told by friends, never start off your talk with a graph. So I'm going to start my talk off with a graph. And the second thing that you need to know is that this is all fake data. The third thing you need to know is why I love this graph so much. Everybody looks at this graph and they see this perfect curve here, but that's not the part that I love. The part I love is that dot up there. Now, what science and what mathematics will tell us is that dot, I can remove that dot because it's messing up my data. But what I think of when I look at that dot is that dot tells me where I can move the rest of the curve.
Right.
So he's much more interested in learning what the dot is than what the average of the curve is.
Okay.
And to me, that's the way I look at life. I don't really know. None of us really know how long we're going to be here necessarily.
Yes, that's true.
I mean, if I were going to look at what the averages are according to life insurance or whatever, you're right. I mean, that's about where the limit is. But if I look at my own family tree, my great grandmother on my mother's side lived to 108. My father's brother is currently 108. I've got longevity on both sides. So that kind of throws the averages out the window. Okay, so if we throw the averages out the window, how do I decide to look at that? Well, the way I decide to look at it is, screw, I don't care how long it's going to be. I'm just going to go live it.
Yes.
I want to live it to the max and not worry about all that. How many days left? Who cares? It doesn't matter. What matters is, what am I doing today?
Yes.
How am I doing? What am I doing with my microphone today?
Well, that's a lovely disposition, I think, to have. That's beautiful.
So let's go to you and get first of all, a bit of a summary from you. What's your view? And then I'm going to ask you a little bit more about how people can reach you, because you're a coach, among other things, and you're also an author. So they want to find out about this stuff. But how do you tie it all together?
Well, that's the thing. I'm probably, even though I talked about the number of days, I'm still in each day to the fullest as far as I can be. Because I think living life true to myself is about micro decisions. Do I want that piece of chocolate really or not, or it's kind of on every level. I'm just trying to live with a degree of consciousness, I suppose, where I feel like if I can go to bed every night going, did I live my life the way I really wanted to today, or did I sort of have any degree of pretense for someone else, and rather than be true to myself? And that's something I can adjust as I go, and then that collectively adds up to a life that I feel has been true for me, no matter how long it lasts or what events I get involved in, or the backdrop doesn't really matter. It's the lived experience, I think, that counts. That's how I tie it all together.
That's really good.
Yeah, and so does that answer your question?
Yeah, answers it beautifully.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but you got to answer the other part too. I mean, somebody who wants to find out more about you, they want to find out how to reach you. Maybe it's those people who saw that article, in the Telegram. They want to find out, how do you get Ray to help me as a coach or something? If somebody wants to reach you, how do they find you?
Yeah, well, my book is called Life Without a Tie, and so the website is called lifewithoutatie.com, and that would be a good start place because that's got lots of information about me, and there's all the contact details there and some photos and stories and all sorts there. That's probably the easiest way, and so I'd recommend people go there. I'm also on LinkedIn. I write a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. Are you guys on that, by the way? I would connect with you if you are.
Yeah, we're actually live streaming to LinkedIn right now. So
okay, great, brilliant, super. So I'll connect with both of you. Yeah,
yep,
totally.
Good stuff.
Great.
All right. And we'll also include in the show notes a link to the website too, to make it easy for people to find it. So,
thank you. That's great. Super.
All right. So now we heard your viewpoint. So Anne-Marie, who is like one of my experts in tying these things together, I'm going to go to the ultimate tire expert. How do you tie it together today, Anne-Marie?
So much stuff. Okay. For me, what did I take? Know yourself, trust yourself, live your life as you want it, and create the life you would like.
Yeah, lovely.
She's good at it.
Yeah,
she's really good at it.
You said it way better than I did.
That's actually quotable. You could put that onto a cereal box or something.
Yeah.
I should write gift cards, shouldn't I?
You should. Yeah, that's good. Hallmark, there's a career waiting. Yeah, okay. Ray, there's one other thing I wanted to do too, and I've been making this a practice for the last couple of years. You made reference earlier to Anne-Marie liking to do things where she was giving, that she was giving back. And that's actually true of everybody who appears on this show, with only one exception I can think of, and he didn't actually get a recording that got recorded. Everybody who comes onto the show is a giver, and you're one of them. One of the things I noticed about givers is that, like you said, you do podcasts, you write on LinkedIn, you post things, you share things, and so forth. And there is a substantial audience of people who consume what you put out, and you never know about them in most cases. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you get a contact. Sometimes you get an email or a text or something. But most of the time, they're consuming it. They're getting benefit from it. And you don't even know about it. And that's what I noticed. I said, whoa, wait a minute. We should give some credit for that. So on behalf of those people you've never met, never seen, never will meet, never will see, who have been hearing you on the podcast, have been reading your LinkedIn, have been doing all the, paying attention to your stuff, reading your book, on their behalf, thank you for what you're doing, because you're making a difference in this life.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. I'm very moved by that. Thank you.
See, we need to know that. We need to hear that.
Yeah.
That's really important stuff.
Yeah, brilliant.
So thank you very much for appearing on the show. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.